Welcome back to the channel. We're back with another Commander deck profile here today with Dyadrine Synthesis Amalgam. For X, a green and a white, you get a 0/1, except you're not actually getting a 0/1 because Dyadrine enters with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of mana spent to cast it. That isn't equal to the X, that's just amount equal to the amount of mana you spent to cast it. So if you leave in the command zone, keep getting that commander tax, that's 2 more +1/+1 counters without having to add to the X. So pretty fun way to get around that, and you always get the 2, so it's a 2/3 at minimum with trample. Then whenever you attack with, you may remove a +1/+1 counter from each of up to 2 target creatures you control. If you do, draw a card and create a 2/2 robot artifact token. So we have plenty of ways to get some +1/+1 artifacts onto multiple creatures because we want to make sure we have plenty of +1/+1 counters to remove in order to get those tokens. Plenty of ways to benefit off of having tokens on top of that, and plenty of ways to get additional +1/+1 counters onto those tokens as well, so that we could use those tokens to make more tokens because I hear you like tokens. But that's going to be a general overview of the deck. Let's get into it card by card. To make sure that we could start attacking the turn he comes out, we have Lightning Greaves, also a little bit of added protection there. Ozolith the Shattered Spire. This way, we only need to get the 1 +1/+1 counter on something to have 2 +1/+1 counters to remove, which will instantly get us that draw power and that 2/2 robot artifact creature token. Probably, honestly, the deck I'm most excited to be able to have this set. Swiftfoot Boots, same as Lightning Greaves, making sure we can attack the turn comes down, so we don't have to wait and we can get those tokens. Earth Crystal, green spells cost 1 less cast. If one or more +1/+1 counters appear on a creature, you put twice that money instead. So, like I said, why wait for just the 1 counter when you can have 2? This way, you have more and more tokens to put on the board there. You also distribute 2 +1/+1 counters, which is the exact amount of counters you need in order to get another token there, and then draw power on top of it. And you also run Ocelot. It looks like I forgot that in this deck profile, but we run in a lot of +1/+1 counter decks, and everyone knows that's one you have to run. Well, don't have to run, but could run. Great Henge is 7 and 2 green, so it costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, which could be quite a bit given how many +1/+1 counters we're going to be putting on things. And you can add 2 green mana and gain 2 life, allowing us some additional ramp there. But the main ability we care about with this deck is whenever a non-token creature you control enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. So we're not going to get those counters on the tokens Dyadrine's creating, but we are going to be able to get them onto our other creatures, having more +1/+1 counters to remove in order to get some additional bonuses there. For our creatures, we have Obzem Falconer. Each creature you control a +1/+1 counter and has flying. We don't want to just keep creating tokens and have nothing to do with them. We want to make sure we can actually swing in with them. So let's get them flying so they can do that. His other abilities Outlast, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. You do have to tap him for it, so that is a downside. So you can't just put as many +1/+1 counters as you want. But if you're doubling that with Earth Crystal or getting an additional one with the Ozolith, that does help you get there quite a bit faster, so that you can make sure that you get those 2 counters to remove from something. Always have that mana available because you're gonna have 1 mana at a certain point, at basically any point. Einok Bondkin, Outlast for the 2, same ability, just 1 additional mana to do it. Each creature you control with +1/+1 counter on has first strike. Normally makes it so you have some good blockers, also makes it so your opponent tends not to want to block those creatures, unless, they're really big creatures and your opponent doesn't have any other way other than lose the game. Armorcraft Judge, and to draw a card for each creature you control, +1/+1 counter on it. We're making tokens, so we're going to have plenty of creatures. We're going to be putting +1/+1 counters on all our creatures, so we're going to have plenty of creatures with +1/+1 counters on it. Be careful you don't deck yourself out with this card. Arwen, Weaver of Hope. Each other creature you control enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it, equal to Arwen's toughness. So normally 2, but if you have her and throw a +1/+1 counter, there's the 2 counters you're going to need on one of your creatures in order to use Dyadrine's ability. That does also work with tokens, allowing you to, those tokens that you just created with Dyadrine, you're getting the additional value off there. Beast Whisperer, whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. A little bit of draw power helps out a whole bunch, because we're going to be casting plenty of creature spells with this deck. Champion of Lambhold, really fun card in this deck. Creatures with power less than Champion of Lambhold power can't block creatures you control, allowing us to swing in with all of our robots. And also whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lambhold. So you remove the 2 counters from Champion of Lambhold to get another token on the board, get another counter onto Champion of Lambhold. Maybe you have Hardened Scales or the Earth Crystal on board, putting you back up to the same amount of counters you're already at. Conclave Mentor. If one or more +1/+1 counters we put on a creature you control, that many +1 are put on it instead. And then whenever this creature dies, gain life equal to its power. It could potentially just be 2, but the additional +1/+1 counters are really what we're looking for out of this deck. This card. We don't really care about life gain too much. Defiler Vigor, Trample, initial. So you can pay 2 life red and green cost of most of your spells. And then whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. That doesn't necessarily be a creature spell. That could be a Great Henge, that could be the Earth Crystal, that could be your Hardened Scales. Something along those lines, allowing us to make sure that we get those additional +1/+1 counters on all of our creatures. Allow us to have more +1/+1 counters to remove for Dyadrine's ability. We gotta start scrolling down. Dust Shell Crawler. Each creature you control +1/+1 counter on it has trample. Once again, we want to make sure we could actually have a way to deal damage to our opponent, not just sit there with a whole bunch of creatures with plenty of power and toughness and nothing to do with them. And it also puts those +1/+1 counters onto something, allowing you to get that token even easier. Evolution Stage allows you to proliferate those +1/+1 counters every time a land enters. Those additional +1/+1 counters, then you have more +1/+1 counters to remove, allowing us more tokens, allowing us more draw power, allowing us more win. Forgotten Ancient, this one, you'll always have the 2 +1/+1 counters on it. You also run some of the Hydras in the stack, but I feel like this is just a good example of some of the ones that you can run. Whenever a player casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Being your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from this creature onto another creature. Yeah. Just a really good ability, easily get those 2 +1/+1 counters, getting you that draw power, getting you that token. Good Fortune Unicorn. Whenever a creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. Once again, we're going to be creating tokens. Let's have them enter with those +1/+1 counters, so we have more +1/+1 counters to remove. Gyre Sage. Add green for each +1/+1 counter on Gyre Sage. So many things put +1/+1 counters on things. Let's get 1,000,000 mana while we're at it. A Guardian of Arsham, really fun card in this deck. Spells cost 1 less cast for each creature you control, +1/+1 counter on it. So if we're having those tokens enter with the +1/+1 counters, those count as well. Also, this creature itself costs 1 less cast for each creature you control, +1/+1 counter on it. So that's possibly a 5/5 for 2. And you're basically casting all your stuff for just the green or the white that you need. Herd Baloth. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on this creature, create a 4/4 green beast creature token. Potentially a way to go infinite with this card with Kadar's Crusade or Good Fortune Unicorn. Right? Nope, this puts on that creature. Never mind. But yeah, we have a way to put a +1/+1 counter onto all creatures. Whenever a creature enters, that's a way to go infinite with this card, allowing plenty of things to remove those +1/+1 counters for. Incubation Druid. Add 1 mana of any type of land you can produce. Add 3 if she has a +1/+1 counter on it. We're going to have plenty of ways to get +1/+1 counters on this creature, so may as well. Juniper Order Ranger. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and this creature, allowing you to get those 2 +1/+1 counters right away anytime a creature enters. Kami of Whispered Hopes. Initial +1/+1 counter anytime we get a +1/+1 counter, because I hear you like +1/+1 counters. Kodama the West Tree, giving all our +1/+1 counter creatures trample, and allowing us to search for plenty of lands out of our deck. Kutzil Malamet Exemplar. Your opponent can't cast spells during your turn, allowing you to just swing in for some big damage. Whenever one or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deal common damage to player, draw a card. Yeah. We'll just swing at each of our opponents, have the trample. That's an easy way to deal damage to plenty of people. Llanowar Elves for additional mana, an additional creature to get some +1/+1 counters on potentially. Loyal Guardian, a way to get plenty of +1/+1 counters on the board in order to make sure we have the resources we need. Luminarch Spirit, beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Well, it's normally going to be 2, but this just allows us to have the +1/+1 counters we need in order to get the ability off. Mikaeus the Lunarch, put a +1/+1 counter on Lunarch. Mikaeus, remove a +1/+1 counter from this creature. Move +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. A really good ability for this deck, because we're turning 1 +1/+1 counter into potentially as many +1/+1 counters as we have creatures, which will tend to be 2, especially if we have those tokens on board. That'll be even more. Renata, Called of the Hunt. Each creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. You know the deal. Rishkar Behemoth Renegade, allowing us to tap our creatures with those +1/+1 counters on them for some mana, allowing us, ways to just storm off, potentially. Tuskguard Captain, giving our +1/+1 creatures trample. Waka, Devoted Guardian. At the beginning of your end step, if a counter was put on Waka's turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. We're going to have plenty of ways to give him counters given his other ability. Whenever Waka deals combat damage to a player, destroy up to one target artifact that player controls. Put a +1/+1 counter onto Waka. He has trample, allowing us to get those +1/+1 counters on everything. And then Zac Fair, allow us to move some counters around, giving a creature indestructible, potentially Dyadrine, because he tends to need it. Onto our enchantments. Hinar's Crusade. We want +1/+1 counters on things. We want to remove +1/+1 counters on things. It's an obvious inclusion, but just be careful. Make sure you have the dice available, is all I'm going to say. Veldar Retreat, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and then gain vigilance until end of turn. If you have a land enter the battlefield, you also get an additional token, allowing some additional creatures to put those +1/+1 counters on. But it's going to be time to be those +1/+1 counters you want to put on everything, so you can remove them to just create a token that way. Because you get the draw power too. Hardened Scales, additional +1/+1 counters on our things with +1/+1 counters, allowing us to get those two anytime we put on one, allowing us to Dyadrine's ability. Innkeeper's Talent, getting that +1/+1 counter onto things, potentially doubling it if we get to the maximum ability, giving us additional protection with a ward 1 for the second ability on top of that. Sphere Grid, let's give them Trample, let's give them Reach, right? Get some, have Reach and Trample, allowing us an actual way to block flying, because we do not have much in this deck with that, and also a way to deal damage to our opponent. Tribute to the World Tree, if our creatures have power 3 or less, we get some +1/+1 counters on them. If they have 3 or greater, we get to draw a card, but this gets us 2 +1/+1 counters on our tokens anytime they enter with Dyadrine's ability, allowing us an additional token essentially next time we swing in. On to the second half of the deck. For our instance, we have Akroma's Will. Once again, we want to make sure we're not just sitting here with plenty of creatures on the board. We want to make sure we actually swing in with them. Beast Within for some removal. Dromoka's Command, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Oh, sorry, my mouse is acting weird. Prevent all damage target instant or sorcery spell will deal this turn, or target creature control fights target creature you don't control, aka removal, some +1/+1 counters, or just some protection for yourself. Generous Gift for that removal, Heroic Intervention for that protection, Inspiring Call for some additional draw power along with protection, both things we like. Path to Exile for that removal, Pledge of Unity, +1/+1 counter on all of our creatures, getting us a little bit of life, but we don't care about that. We just want the +1/+1 counters, get more creatures, getting us more draw power. Return of the Wild Speaker, we'll probably have a big creature at a certain point in the game, given all these +1/+1 counters we're putting on things. So let's go ahead and do that and draw some cards off it. And also get +3/+3 on creatures, if you need it. Snakeskin Veil, getting us some +1/+1 counters, giving us some protection. Both things we like to see. Stroke of Midnight for that removal, Swords of Plowshares for that removal, and Unbreakable Formation for an additional source of protection there. For our board wipe, we have Austere Command here. It'll definitely vary based on which mode you want to use, based upon what you have on the board. Basri's Solidarity, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, allowing you those 2 +1/+1 counters. Use your commander's ability. Cultivate for some ramp, Damning Verdict, destroying all of our opponent's creatures and none of ours, because all of ours will have this +1/+1 counters. Farseek for the ramp, Goldamas Reach, Nature's Lure, Rampant Growth, all for the ramp there. Requisition Ray, getting some additional +1/+1 counters, potentially some removal if you have the mana for it while you're at it. Shamanic Revelation, draw a card for each creature you control, creating so many tokens. We're going to have a way to benefit off of that, and most of them will have power 4 or greater, so we may as well gain a life while we're at it. Synchronized Charge, giving all of our creatures with +1/+1 counters on them, Vigilance and Trample for a turn. Harmonize it in order to get an additional turn, but just an overall good ability there, giving us, potentially a turn we can just swing in for the win. And then Thirsting Roots either gets us a land or gets us to proliferate. Normally, the proliferate is what we're looking for, to have those 2 +1/+1 counters to win the game. Really use Dyadrine's ability to not win the game all the time. But that's the deck there. I'm just going to scroll through the lands. If you guys have any comments on the deck, make sure you leave that down there in the comment section. If you liked the video, make sure you like the video. And if you want to see more like this, make sure you subscribe so you can stay tuned, because we're going to be trying to cover all the Edge of Eternities commanders. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of the day.